figures, celebrated for their visionary leadership and profound impact on the course of human events. Among these towering figures stand Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and Winston Churchill, both remembered for their indelible contributions to shaping the world as we know it today. Their names are etched in the annals of time, immortalized through monuments, literature, and commemorations that speak of their greatness. Yet, as we delve deeper into their lives, a startling revelation comes to light, a facet of their character that has remained shrouded in obscurity: their deeply rooted racist beliefs and hatred towards black people. It's a story that has been hidden for far too long, and it's time to bring it to the forefront. Mahatma Gandhi, an embodiment of nonviolent resistance and the champion of India's struggle for independence, is revered across the globe as a paragon of righteousness. Likewise, Winston Churchill, the stalwart British Prime Minister who rallied his nation during its darkest hours in World War II, is hailed as a symbol of courage and resilience. These are the narratives that have echoed through the corridors of time, shaping the collective memory of nations. However, the hidden underbelly of their legacies reveals a disturbing truth, one that challenges the romanticized perceptions we hold of these icons. The purpose of this article is not to diminish the substantial accomplishments of Gandhi and Churchill, nor to discredit the pivotal roles they played in history. Rather, it aims to unearth a lesser-known aspect of their lives, a facet that complicates the simplistic narratives we have woven around them. In this video, we shall delve into the historical record, examining the writings, speeches, and actions of both Gandhi and Churchill, seeking to shed light on their troubling perspectives towards black people. Before we get right into the video, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to keep informed of our eye-opening black narrative. Let me take you back to the 1940s, where Churchill was serving as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Gandhi was leading India's fight for independence from British rule. During this time, Churchill made several disparaging remarks about black people, referring to them as savages and barbaric in his private correspondence. Meanwhile, Gandhi, who is often hailed as a champion of nonviolence and equality, made his own racist comments calling black people Kafirs, which is no different from the N-word. These revelations are shocking, to say the least. We've been taught to view Gandhi and Churchill as paragons of virtue, but the truth is far more complicated. It's hard to reconcile their achievements with the fact that they held such hateful views towards a particular group of people. What's even more concerning is the fact that this history has been largely erased or ignored. There are numerous biographies on Winston Churchill, but close to none exposes his racist views on black people. The same can be said of Gandhi, but it's time to acknowledge their racism and the harm that it caused. Mahatma Gandhi. Let's start with Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of India's independence movement. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, widely known as Mahatma Gandhi, is a figure of great reverence and respect across the world. His tireless efforts to promote nonviolent resistance and lead India to independence from British rule have earned him a place in history as a visionary leader and a champion of civil rights. His campaigns of satyagraha, or passive resistance, left an indelible mark on the course of history, inspiring countless movements for social change. Gandhi's commitment to justice and equality was evident in his efforts to dismantle the oppressive caste system in India, his advocacy for the rights of farmers and laborers, and his dedication to promoting harmony among religious communities. His philosophy of ahimsa, or nonviolence, remains a powerful guiding principle for those seeking peaceful solutions to conflicts. However, recent revelations have shed light on some aspects of Gandhi's life that have raised uncomfortable questions about his attitudes towards certain racial groups. While Gandhi fought against British colonialism and sought justice for his own people, there is evidence to suggest that he held prejudiced views towards other marginalized communities. Simply put, Gandhi never liked black people. One of the lesser-known and troubling aspects of Gandhi's legacy is his documented statements and writings that reveal racist attitudes towards black Africans. Gandhi's racist views on blacks are not just a product of hearsay. In fact, there have been numerous affirmations that the anti-colonial nationalist was in fact racist. South African academics Ashwin Desai and Ghulam Vahed, who spent 7 years exploring the complex story of activists who lived in their country for more than 2 decades and campaigned for the rights of Indian people, released a controversial book detailing his acts of racism. In The South African Gandhi, stretcher-bearer of empire. Desai and Vahed write that during his stay in Africa, Gandhi kept the Indian struggle separate from that of Africans and coloreds, even though the latter were also denied political rights on the basis of color, and could also lay claim to being British subjects. While working as a lawyer for Indian immigrants, he also advocated for the segregation of Indian and black people in public facilities. He even wrote in a letter to a colleague that the Indian is being dragged down to the position of the raw Kafir, Kafir being a derogatory term for black people. In 1893, while Gandhi was living in South Africa, he wrote in a letter to the natal parliament that the Indians are undoubtedly infinitely superior to the Kafirs. In another letter from 1904, he described black people as savage, raw, and uncivilized, and claimed that the white race in South Africa should be the predominating race. Gandhi's hate for black people continued to be on full display in many of his letters. In a letter to a health officer in Johannesburg, he said that the council must withdraw Kafirs from an unsanitary slum called the Coolie location, where a large number of Africans lived alongside Indians. He also said, about the mixing of the Kafirs with the Indians, I must confess I feel most strongly. The same year he wrote that unlike the African, the Indian had no war dances, nor does he drink Kafir beer. When Durban was hit by a plague in 1905, Gandhi wrote that the problem would persist as long as Indians and Africans were being herded together indiscriminately at the hospital. But Gandhi's racism wasn't just limited to words. In fact, he actively fought against the rights of black people in South Africa. In 1906, he supported a law that required all Indians to be fingerprinted, photographed, and carry a registration certificate with them at all times, a law that did not apply to white people. He even went so far as to organize Indian volunteers to help the British Army fight against the Zulu rebellion in 1906. Gandhi's actions towards black people were not just limited to words and speeches. He also actively worked against the interests of black people in South Africa. In 1906, he led a campaign against a proposed law that would have granted voting rights to black people in South Africa. Gandhi argued that black people were not civilized enough to participate in the political process, and that giving them the right to vote would lead to the degradation and lowering of the Indian race. And it wasn't just in South Africa where Gandhi displayed his racism. In his own homeland of India, he fought for the preservation of the caste system, which placed Dalits, formerly known as untouchables, at the bottom of society and subjected them to horrific discrimination and violence. Gandhi believed that the caste system was a divine law and opposed efforts to abolish it. Gandhi's views on race and caste have been criticized by many, including civil rights leader Malcolm X. In fact, when asked about Gandhi's philosophy, Malcolm X famously said, "I admire the Mahatma very much, his philosophy, his discipline, but I have to reject his philosophy of nonviolence because I don't believe in letting anyone who attacks me just walk away from the consequences of their actions." Gandhi's own writings, including his newspaper Indian Opinion, contained passages that belittled Africans and expressed a belief in the superiority of Indians over them. While it is important to view historical figures within the context of their times, Gandhi's views on race are undeniably inconsistent with his larger message of equality and justice. Mahatma Gandhi's legacy is undoubtedly complex and multifaceted. While he is widely revered for his teachings of nonviolent resistance, civil disobedience, and his role in India's struggle for independence, it is essential to acknowledge the uncomfortable truths that also exist within his life and writings. Gandhi's racist words and attitudes towards black people cannot be dismissed or ignored. It is indeed surprising and disappointing that a man who advocated for love, peace, and equality could harbor prejudices against a particular group based solely on the color of their skin. This aspect of Gandhi's perspective challenges the idealized image that many hold of him, and it underscores the importance of critically examining historical figures in their entirety, rather than selectively focusing on their positive contributions. Winston Churchill. Now, let's move on to Winston Churchill, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Winston Churchill is widely used as an inspiration example and a model when talking about great leaders or examples of great leadership. This is because he provided himself. showcasing outstanding leadership skills during critical moments in history. His indomitable spirit and unwavering resolve have earned him a place of honor in the annals of time. Churchill's contributions to world affairs are notable, from his resolute stance against Nazi aggression during World War II to his eloquent speeches that rallied the British people during times of crisis. Churchill's legacy is marked by his remarkable achievements, which have led to monuments and praises that stand as testaments to his impactful presence. His strategic prowess and determination were instrumental in guiding the Allied forces to victory against the forces of tyranny. His speeches, etched in history, continue to inspire generations, resonating with the ideals of freedom and democracy. However, it is essential to acknowledge that beneath the surface of Churchill's remarkable feats lies a complex individual with flaws and contradictions. While history often lauds his accomplishments, it is equally important to confront the uncomfortable truths about his attitudes and beliefs. Recent revelations shed light on his racist views, particularly his attitudes towards people of African descent. Churchill was no friend to black people. He held deeply racist views and made no attempt to hide them. In fact, he made several public statements that reveal his disdain for people of color. In 1901, Churchill wrote about his experiences in the Boer War, describing the native people of South Africa as a raw Kaffir crowd, very little above the animal. He went on to say that he did not admit, for instance, that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia. In his words, "I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place." Churchill also supported the use of chemical weapons against uncivilized tribes, including the Kurds and Afghans. In a memo to the British Colonial Secretary in 1919, Churchill wrote, "I do not understand this squeamishness about the use of gas. I am strongly in favor of using poisonous gas against uncivilized tribes." This statement is particularly disturbing given the fact that chemical weapons were later used by the British against the Iraqi people in the 1920s. The same Churchill also opposed granting independence to India, stating that he did not want to see that this magnificent country should be reduced to the level of the barbarous native states of Africa. It is important to note that Churchill's racism was not limited to his words. He actively supported policies that oppressed people of color, including the forced repatriation of black people from the Caribbean. In 1948, the British government introduced the British Nationality Act, which allowed people from the Commonwealth to enter the UK freely. However, Churchill opposed this law and supported the repatriation of Caribbean immigrants, stating that they were a burden on the UK's economy. During his time as Prime Minister, Churchill oversaw policies that resulted in the death of millions of Indians. The Bengal famine, which took place in 1943, was one such tragedy that was directly caused by Churchill's callous and discriminatory policies. At the time, India was still under British colonial rule, and Churchill had little regard for the lives of the Indian people. When the famine struck, Churchill and his administration took no action to alleviate the suffering of the people in Bengal. In fact, he actively prevented aid from being sent to the region, which resulted in the deaths of an estimated 3 million people. Churchill's racist beliefs were evident in his attitude towards Indians, whom he referred to as a beastly people with a beastly religion. He believed that they were inferior to white people and that they deserved to suffer. This is not the only instance of Churchill's racist actions and beliefs. He also played a significant role in the brutal suppression of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, which resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Kenyans. For those who don't know, the Mau Mau uprising was a rebellion against British colonial rule that lasted from 1952 to 1960. The Mau Mau fighters, primarily from the Kikuyu tribe, sought to reclaim their land, dignity, and freedom from the British settlers who had taken everything from them. Churchill saw the Mau Mau as barbaric and savage and believed that they needed to be whipped into submission. Churchill's government ordered the arrest and detention of thousands of Kenyans suspected of supporting the rebellion. These detainees were subjected to torture, rape, and murder by British soldiers and prison guards. The atrocities committed by the British during this time were so horrific that they were later referred to as the Kenya Emergency. Churchill himself was aware of the brutality being inflicted on the Kenyan people, but he did nothing to stop it. In fact, he actively encouraged it, famously saying, "I am not prepared to accept the position that the Mau Mau terrorists should be treated as martyrs." It's estimated that between 20,000 and 100,000 Kenyans were killed during the Mau Mau uprising, many of them at the hands of British soldiers and officials. And yet, Churchill remained unrepentant, even years later, when evidence of the atrocities began to emerge. For years, we've been taught about Gandhi's peaceful resistance and non-violent approach to fighting for independence. But what we don't learn in schools is that Gandhi was openly racist towards black South Africans during his time in South Africa. In his writings and speeches, he referred to black people as savages, and even advocated for their segregation from Indian communities. Winston Churchill, on the other hand, is widely remembered as the prime minister who led Britain through World War II. However, Churchill was also a staunch imperialist who held extremely racist views towards non-white people. He believed that white people were superior to other races and openly expressed his disdain for black people, calling them savages and barbarous tribes. To him, people from India were the beastliest people in the world next to the Germans. And he also admitted that he did not really think that black people were as capable or as efficient as white people. Churchill's policies led to the deaths of millions of people in British colonies, including India, where his policies contributed to a famine that killed millions. It's time we stop glorifying these men and start acknowledging their hateful views and actions towards black people. It's not enough to simply say, "That was a different time," as racism is always wrong, no matter the time period. We cannot continue to sweep these ugly truths under the rug and ignore the impact that these men had on the lives of black people. We need to start having honest conversations about the problematic figures in history and acknowledge the harm that they have caused. Only then can we move forward and create a better future for all people, regardless of race. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to stay on the channel and get more videos like this. Thanks for watching.